So my name is Melanie Drake and I am the Global Training and Resources Manager for the English Assessment Portfolio. So if you haven't met me before, if you haven't attended one of our sessions, or even if you have, a really warm welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to host for you this session on teaching test prep, an open discussion with our fabulous panelists, which you'll see in the window, which I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment. So whether you are teaching, let's say, IELTS or TOEFL, or perhaps another high stakes test, or maybe you're thinking of moving into this area, you can learn how to make a transition to PTE Academic through our discussion today. So a little bit of housekeeping on one slide, just so that you're all aware. So as always, we will be recording this webinar, and so if you have to drop early, or if you have some colleagues that you know can't attend the live session, you can let them know that they can of course access this recording afterwards. And I would also ask that we're going to make some time for your questions at the end, as we always do. So if you do have any questions for our speakers, please submit it into the Q&A box. It's easier for me to get to them, and we'll make sure that we have time to address as many of them as we can. So with that, let's do some introductions. So Louise, I'm going to go with you first, since you are closest to me in the order. Just everybody, I was going to say wave, but I've just realized your name is there, so you don't need to. So Louise FitzGerald has been an ELT professional for more than 30 years. She's taught, trains teachers and managed ELT programs in Australia, Egypt, China, and even Cambodia. So Louise currently teaches academic English to pre-sessional students at the University of New South Wales Global, and as well as proficiency and achievement test development. She's also been involved in item writing for a range of computer and paper-based high-stakes international tests. So welcome, Louise. I'm so happy you're joining us today.
Thank you, Mel.
Then David Williamson. So David has been an ESL teacher for several decades and teaching online since 2016. He's also been head teacher at E2 Language, which many of you will be familiar with, and involved in the early stages of developing online resources, writing test prep content, and has now delivered thousands of tutorials and live classes preparing students for our very own PTE Academic. So really exciting to have you here today, David. Welcome.
Thank you.
But of course, not least, we have Dr. Anna China. Hi, Anna. Anna has a BA in English and Portuguese and a Master's in Education, as well as a PhD in Applied Linguistics. And to top that off, recently a TESOL postgraduate diploma as well. Anna started teaching English as a foreign language back in 1986 in Montreal in Canada, and looks like you haven't stopped since. So in the year 2000, she started teaching English proficiency tests, which is the big topic of conversation today. And she's actually also a TOEFL and TOEIC examiner too. Currently, she's a tenured professor in a public college and has been teaching online since 2008. So we've got a fabulous lineup of panelists today, and I'm really looking forward to having an engaging discussion with you. So before we get going with the conversation, we're really interested to understand our audience and perhaps what you understand about either PTE Academic or other high stakes tests, because that will help us in our conversation. It's just interesting to know who we have with us today. So I believe we're now going to put up two questions which you guys directly will be able to answer. So you should be able to see them on the screen now. You'll see you've got two questions. The first one, I would ask you all to rate your knowledge of the test PTE Academic. So this is Pearson's English Language Proficiency Test. And of course, we get a real mix that attend our sessions. Is absolutely fine. If this is completely new to you, or you haven't even heard of it, but if you could rate it poor, fair, or excellent. And the second question, what test do you primarily prepare students for? If you do. So you see we've put a range there, or perhaps you're teaching something else. You might not be involved in test prep right now, and that's absolutely fine. So we'll give you a few minutes to pop those answers in. So many questions in the chat already. Oh no, there's not. Sorry, in the queue, it's not. It's a Q&A. Fine. I saw 36. Then I thought, goodness, lots of questions. So maybe give it. I don't know how many people have voted. Maybe give it another 10, 20 seconds or so. I know there's still some people coming in. All right, let's have a look at these results. And I know on the panel, you'll probably be interested to see this too. So knowledge of PTE, really interesting mix here then. Some people that are very new to it, more of you, just over more of you, 49%, nearly half, have a fair amount of knowledge of PTE. And there's actually 32% of you that have an excellent knowledge of PTE, which is brilliant. And test you primarily prepare students for? Yes, okay, a good chunk of you, over half of you, 54%. Prepare learners for IELTS, but it seems as if you're quite a test prep heavy bunch here. So really interesting to see that we have a good mix across PTE, Cambridge, TOEFL, IELTS, and some other tests as well. I couldn't put all of them in there, of course. So yeah, interesting. I think you'll agree. A good audience here. I'm sure this is going to pave the way for some good questions. So thank you for that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and this way I think for the audience it's a little bit nicer just to have us all on the screen. I have nothing else to share. So there we go. And hopefully, I think that's a bit nicer, isn't it? A bit more like a conversation. So let's get started. I wanted to begin fairly broadly, given that we're talking about teaching test prep. And obviously we know that English is the gateway to working globally from absolutely anywhere. And the only time I'm going to put in a few stats and some data is now, and then that's the last time. But I do want to reference a Pearson Global Learner Survey that we did last year. So we spoke to learners, non-English speaking, learners where English was not their native language in Brazil, China, and India, and also in Canada. And we asked them how important it is for them to be fluent in English. So across these countries, they had responses either very to somewhat important, as you could expect. So in India, 90% of learners said that being fluent was very to somewhat important. Brazil, 89%. China, 80%. Canada, 95%. So it's not necessarily news. We know how important fluency is, but I think that the key be here that if we have learners that want to go to an English speaking country, whether it's for migration purposes, to study, or for work, what will get them there is one of these English language proficiency tests first. So we know that test prep is a really, really important area for both teachers and learners, actually. So I want to start quite broadly. This isn't aimed at anyone in particular, but I think for the audience, it would really be really interesting for them to understand a little bit about your experience as a teacher, and perhaps moving from, if this is your experience, general English to perhaps teaching test prep or possibly academic English, because for some people it can happen by accident. It can simply just be where you work. And for other people, it's more intentional. I would be interested to know. I'm not going to pick on you. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
Yes, I'm happy to go first.
Thank you.
So my career has been mainly in management of English language courses, and but before that in general English, and now in academic pre-sessional English. And the transition actually wasn't that difficult, except that academic English is much more rigorous. It's less fun, more structured, but I find much more fulfilling. I think we're really moving our students towards a goal of theirs. Yeah. And when we do that, you know, I think that for a teacher too, that's more fulfilling.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. Anna, I see you nodding your head. Do you have something?
Yes, definitely. But I still believe that even though we do start to teach, after we start teaching academic English, we're still attached to general English somehow, because some aspects of teaching academic English, we refer back to general English. We can't really move forward in academic English without having that, you know, the support from general English. So even though we transition, we're still attached to general English and in many aspects of language teaching.
Absolutely.
I agree with
and
you.
More of a progression, isn't it, than just simply a switch? Yeah. David, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I transitioned from teaching EAP at a university into directly for test prep, and I find that consolidating skills for test preparation is quite exciting as well, because it's like Louise mentioned, there is an end to the learning, and the end to the learning is the measurement of the learning in the exam. So getting students to consolidate what they know and then being able to encourage them. They're at a certain level when they're ready for the test anyway. So they've arrived at a place where they need encouragement on how to tackle a test, how to prepare for a test, how to set up study patterns for tests. Some people have been away from studying for a while and then come to sit their exam and need to consolidate their skills or relearn study skills. And I find that's quite interesting as well. So from a teacher's perspective, it's getting people prepared for the test, consolidating their skills and giving them enough practice and feedback in order for them to acknowledge where they're at and where they need to take themselves if they're self-studying. So as adult learners, they are in a place where they know how important it is to take the test. So when we say high stakes tests, they are high stakes, like you mentioned, for people to migrate or study, and people's lives are transformed by the results of this test.
Yes.
So for us, that makes it interesting, like Louise says, exciting, because the results are tangible, they are real, and lives are transformed by the success in this test.
So what I'm getting from all of you in one way or another is that regardless of perhaps why or those individual circumstances of how you ended up in test prep, it sounds as if you've all gained a great deal of satisfaction and perhaps motivation by this sort of meatier aspects of academic English, let's say how you're pushing your students, but also the high stakes element and what's at stake, and you know how focused you have to be, and this sort of as well what you can get out of helping your students progress in their lives. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks. I think that's a good way to open it as well. I mean, a really strong opener there. I want to ask as well, get quite specific here, because I know that this is something that a lot of teachers tuning in today will want to know about. How did you, if this is applicable to you, how did you find the transition then from, if you have experience teaching IELTS, which I believe, Dr. Anna, you do, but the transition from IELTS or perhaps another high stakes test, if you have been involved in teaching other tests, to, in this case, PTE Academic specifically. I know a lot of teachers are interested to know, what does this transition feel like? Or perhaps how or why did it occur? Anna, I wanted to ask you first, because I'm aware that you, I believe, do teach various high stakes tests at the same time. And I'd love you to tell us a little bit about when you brought on PTE Academic, your experience of that.
Well, many students, they opt for PTE Academic because it's a second option to IELTS in particular. Many students find IELTS quite tough when it comes to writing. And PTE in the system, it does have it's less rigorous maybe in terms compared to IELTS. So that is one option, but mostly I feel that when students, the teachers transit from IELTS to PTE teaching, and while you're on both, you really require to distinguish what are the requirements for one test to the other test, in particular when it comes to scoring, because the scoring system changes a lot. So the teacher has to be aware of these because some differences are subtle, others aren't. So being very familiar with the scoring procedure is one step. And secondly, for the teacher, when it comes to teaching PTE, there is a touch of challenge because there are 20 sections in the PTE. And it's amazing how you can help a student qualify when you teach the 20 sections. So the command of language, it really they grow in language because they have to go through 20 different basically skills.
Yeah.
It is 4 skills, but within those 4 skills, you have activities and many students. So that gives more opportunities for students. If he doesn't do so well in one task of speaking, he has another task of speaking. So it's not that just one interview like the IELTS. The PT, you have more opportunities to expose and to, reach your scores, I would say. So that is one. In all sections, you have more opportunities to reach your scores. So you're not stuck in one style on one type of question.
Yeah.
And I think
go for it, Louise.
With that too, that with the PT Academic, you can pick up points for various areas of skill. So it's not a blunt instrument. It's a very I think it's really a fair way, because in some, to think of it, if you have, it's kind of looking at micro skills in a way, and picking up points for abilities to do parts of things rather than the whole block. And I think that's really helpful for students, and to understand that and how that works.
Yeah,
and beneficial, of course.
From a teaching perspective, it's quite, there are behind the communication skills that they're assessed on for each task type in the test, which is writing, speaking, reading, and listening. What Louise is talking about are enabling skills. So there are something like 6 or 7 enabling skills. So it's like grammar, vocabulary, spelling, written discourse, and I think there are one or two others. And those skills are individually assessed. So they're the micro skills that need to be taught in order for students to do well in the sections of in the 20 sections of the test. So teaching specific grammar skills or vocabulary skills or writing skills doesn't disappear. So those need to be addressed specifically for the students' results to improve in the test as well. So it's a way of consolidating those skills. And that's why when I speak to general English teachers, they realize that general English teaching is such a large area, but teaching for tests is more specific with results in mind that are close to hand. So in terms of time, preparation, motivation to stay learning, the reason for learning, the purpose is this test that happens. Of course, life happens beyond the test. Thank goodness, it doesn't just stop at the end of the test. But the reason for studying hard and working hard and staying motivated to learn can be the results of the test as well. But those skills still need to be taught and learned along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I found something quite similar, that I liked test prep because I liked the motivational aspect of it. I liked the timeframes of it, the focus. Yeah, I think it's a personal preference to some degree. Lots of really interesting points there. But I suppose I would ask then that, do you think there are any advantages then to teaching sort of perhaps 2 high stakes tests alongside each other, perhaps to your own teaching practice? Because I understand that a lot of teachers, and this is normal, completely normal, you perhaps have been teaching one test for a really, really long time. It could be IELTS, it could be the Cambridge Main Suite. And you become so familiar with that test, you know exactly what is needed from your students, you know how to develop these skills, you have the activities down in the classroom. And I think sometimes when you are asked perhaps by your director of studies or whatever the reason may be to take on a new test and start doing test prep classes for it, there can be a bit of resistance there. And I think it's a really interesting point to try to sort of open ourselves up to the idea, or be receptive to the idea that there's actually can be some advantages to our teaching practice of perhaps balancing a few tests alongside each other. Louise, is there anything you could add to that?
Yes. Yeah, I think students need alternatives, and so do we as teachers. And I think this time of COVID, we need more alternatives and kind of more strings to our bow than we've ever had before, because the whole working environment has changed, but also, I mean, it's been a huge change. Well, I know in Australia, and may also, I presume, elsewhere, that with students having to move online, we've actually lost a lot of students. So I think it's important that we have more variety to offer our students, and we need to look at their needs and how we can fulfill them.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, Anna, I wanted to ask you though as well, just briefly, particularly in your experience, I'm putting you slightly on the spot here, but I'd be so interested to hear if there's anything that you could mention specifically around advantages to your own teaching practice, given that you do juggle quite a few different high stakes tests in terms of your teaching at the moment.
Well, the first thing I must admit is that even though we all use computers and it's a daily routine, once you start teaching PTE, your computer literacy really increases. So that's one great advantage for teachers, because I think that as a teacher, we're on constant learning basis. We never seem to end our learning process.
Yeah.
And so teaching PTE does, even though now recently IELTS has gone online as well, and but the PTE, you're much more involved as well. And also, as a teacher, I feel that we can help students in a second or third attempt. Unfortunately, many students go for second and third attempts when they're going for proficiency tests. And the report score from PTE and the way the test is organized, as I said, if the teacher really understands the process, the report score really helps us prepare the student for a second and third attempt.
Yeah.
With the amount of information we have there.
Brilliant. Thanks for making that point, because I think that's a really key one, the information that we do get on the score reports in terms of feedback and a bit of a remediation plan. But David, I want to come to you now, because something that I want to ask you about, and again, I know the teachers that are listening want to understand more about, is the practice of teaching PTE Academic. Now, I know you have taught and continue to teach so many tutorials on this test. Can you give the audience a little bit of a flavor of perhaps how you have found teaching PTE Academic, and perhaps maybe what students are looking for as well when they come into your sessions, apart from the obvious passing?
I don't think they don't know before they turn up. But yes, so we teach across two styles, which is what we're talking about, this medium, which is what we're dealing with at the moment via Zoom. And we can teach one-to-one or one-to-many. And we teach webinars like this. There are 122 people here. Yesterday, I would have taught this number in a spelling webinar. So we can target people that can't see us, but we can communicate with them. They communicate via chat. Now, that's interesting. But what is amazing is to do one-on-ones in this session. So you bring all your teaching skills to a fairly short and intense period with one student, which means that you can end up doing diagnosing their difficulties and ameliorating instantly what it is that they need help with. So we can target their speaking issues, they often want to do that, or their writing issues, and we can deal with them one-on-one. So there's a lot of screen sharing going on. There's a lot of individual attention that we're able to give them, making them the center of the experience. So from a teaching perspective, it's amazing. So in terms of pronunciation practice, or our specialties as pronunciation teachers, as speaking teachers about structuring their responses for the PTE, for example, as writing specialists to work out what issues they have with grammar and how we can address those instantly and identify what their problems are. We can, in this medium, we can deal with them specifically. So the pleasure and joy, which it is constantly, it doesn't stop, is the relationship between teacher and student improvement as a result of that interaction. And it's ongoing, and it is extremely rewarding. But the idea that we're using a digital interface that is particularly suited to PTE, because PTE went online first, and when we went online first, which was my intention originally as well, PTE was purpose-built for the teaching of that, because students are at home practicing for the PTE in order to prepare for a computer-based exam. So their computer literacy skills develop as well, which is the way to understand how to respond in a limited amount of time to a question.
So I think it's really good to know that you've managed to mirror the impact that you had in face-to-face lessons, if you ever did any of those, that it's also working really well online. I think that's great. And really motivational for teachers here to understand. Louise, I want to come to you on this one, just to change direction slightly. We do get a lot of questions from both students, but teachers specifically, around the key differences between IELTS and PTE Academic. Now, there's lots and lots of things that we could go into, and similarities too. But we've spoken about this a few times, Louisa. I mean, is there anything in particular that you think is worth highlighting today for the teachers in terms of perhaps some important differences there?
I think a very important difference is that the PTE Academic uses genuine texts from academic sources, and both for the listening and the reading. And I think this is really important. Authentic texts, which have not been changed in any way. They're not written by item writers. They're taken as excerpts from a text that these test takers will use when they go to university or whatever other study they're doing. This is vitally important for them to be able to use these texts, to understand them, and to be able to interact with these texts successfully. And I think that is a major plus for this test, because while they're preparing for the test, they're also getting this very important academic skill. I think that's
I think that's an incredibly good point. And of course, these texts, and even if you're not using a specific textbook, they can be found widely. And I guess it's about the usefulness of preparing learners with skills that will take them beyond just the actual study of the test, right? I would love to ask you all about your take on this, but we've got so many other questions I want to get through, and time is pushing on. And one that's really important as well is the apprehension around technology use. Now, this is not just something that students experience, it's something that teachers experience as well with computer-based tests. So I think it's really important we have a bit of focus on this today. I'm really curious to understand within your own, whether teaching or training experience, whatever it may be, surely at some point, whether it's even just in a conversation, it might not even be directly in the classroom, I don't know, but I'm guessing you have experienced some kind of apprehension towards PTE Academic due to the technology that's used, due to the fact that they're students use a computer to complete this test. It's not done on, it's not a paper-based test anymore. There's no pen and paper, and it's marked by a computer. Without going into loads and loads of nitty-gritty detail necessarily, how have you been able to navigate these conversations? I think that is a really interesting point. Is there anybody that has some experience they could draw upon there? Anna, you're nodding. Can I come to you on this?
Yes, definitely. And there are little details such as typing skills. So I've already, they need to master typing skills, and many of them, they're still like, one little finger there. So even suggesting websites to help them, improve their typing skill is part of teaching PTE. So teaching PTE uses all of your, teaching. It requires you put together everything as a teacher. We can't forget that they're also going through a very hard moment, preparing for a high-stake proficiency test. So it's like English knowledge, language knowledge, emotionally, some of them are very, unstable, and some of them are going for the 7th or 8th time, unfortunately, or they're switching from IELTS. So our job as a teacher for PT in particular, when they make this shift, it takes, we can explore all of our skills, personal skills as a human being, to cooperate and to make the student feel strong. Yeah. And as well as all of these issues of technology. I may have gone a little bit off topic there, but it's all part of that, I think that teaching, PT embraces all of these aspects.
Yeah, so, I think you're absolutely right. It's all relevant. And again, you hit on a really important point around a touch typing, being able to type at a reasonable speed, being familiar with getting your way around a computer. Is there anything else you want to add here? I don't know if David or Louise wanted to say anything else, because I do think this is an important topic. Louise, go for it.
I think that typing is now a life skill. And I don't think any student should should go to university without being able to type. They can't submit handwritten essays anymore or any handwritten work. They have to be able to type. So I think if they can't type and they want to, they come to us and say they want to do their test, send them to learn to type first. I learned to type in 10 hours. I did it in a week. And I think it's the best skill and the fastest skill I ever learned, because I use it all the time. I'm a touch typist, it's wonderful. But I think our students self-select on the tests. If there's a student who cannot type and doesn't know their way around a computer, I don't think they're going to choose this test. I think it will take time before they come to this test. But the other thing I've noticed in the 6 years that I've been involved with PTE Academic is that students now interact with computers all the time. And I think students, especially younger students, under maybe, I don't know, the age of 30 perhaps, are more at home speaking to a device than they are to a person. And I think that speaking to a device in a test is less threatening than speaking to a person who is judging your level of language ability. Yeah. And, I think it's a big plus. I really think that they are less anxious, less stressed because of this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yes, if you don't necessarily have that experience of a physical person in front of you, possibly judging your answers. I mean, David, I want to get your take on this as well. Again, sort of keeping to the area around you. I'm sure that you've dealt with a lot of students who are very tech proficient, are fast typers, know that really their way around a computer very well. Have you worked with any learners or even teachers perhaps that are less comfortable with the idea of taking a high stakes test which isn't pen and paper based?
Well, I love that. It's a great question. When the joys of teaching online are that you experience students just as in this group from all over the world. So from South Africa to Mongolia to Argentina and back. And when we have a list of the people, just like in this webinar, people around the world, what was amazing for me first on was that every time that people connected, the percentage of connection rate is about 95%, meaning people turn up on time, they're there present, and they're ready to go. Now that's phenomenal in itself in an education context. The other thing was, can you show me your phone? Now, in the background, I'm watching, this person has an internet connection coming through a hole in the wall from the street upstairs. It doesn't look like a really lavish spot. They have a phone. Everybody has a phone. Where's your phone? Now, it's not downstairs or somewhere else. It's on the desk in front of them. So the use of technology is literally ubiquitous. Everybody, from everywhere, has access to a phone. And when I say everybody, that includes people who are living in extreme circumstances have a phone. So that was extraordinary, because from an education point of view, it means we can access students everywhere to give them information in order to be able to learn. The flow on from that is the development of technology, which Louise refers to as a lot of the learning of English at the moment. A lot of people developing materials to teach and speak and practice learning a language. And so they get used to using technology. So students, computer literate. Teachers, now we've employed a lot of teachers. Some have come and some have gone. And the reason they go is because their typing skills aren't up to speed. They're used to being able to connect digitally, operate in an environment like this, be exposed on Zoom and work very quickly and efficiently. We can't employ them for periods of time because they're too slow. And they are much slower than the students. So from a teacher's point of view, to get up to tech speed, immerse yourself in it and do it and enjoy it and work out how to do it. Learn how to do it, practice doing it, give yourself a chance to do it, develop the skills. Now, when I attend conferences like English Australia conferences and realize that I know a bit, I think, there are others who know a lot about other things. There's always so much to learn from each other that's inspiring about what people are doing in terms of connecting with students, engaging with students, getting students included, particularly students who are maybe unmotivated or in difficult circumstances. It's just a way of giving students access to education, which is.
I think that's a really great point, and I can see that you're all getting so much sort of praise and agreement in the chat box there. We've got time for a few more questions. I also want to ask you, because again, I know that teachers will be very keen to hear more about this. What do you think is a common mistake that learners preparing for high stakes tests like PTE Academic make? I mean, just to put you on the spot a little bit here. Anna, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that,
because we've only got time for a few more, but.
Yeah, they focus a lot on the question types without understanding what's behind the question type. So skills, so the supporting skills. And that's where the teacher comes in. That is our role, showing the student and diagnosing what you're missing in terms of supporting skills to be able to develop the question well and reach a good score. So
okay,
I would say that's the major point.
That's a really good one. I mean, is there anything else, Louise, you were nodding as well? Is there any additional you can add? Because I think this is. I
think the biggest mistake is not enough time to prepare. Students come and they say, I've booked my test for next week. And you think, oh my goodness, how much preparation you've done? None. And it's not possible, it's not going to work. So students need to have enough time, even if their English language is at a reasonable level, they still need to understand the test and understand how they can succeed, how they can show their skills in the best light in the test. So I think that just making sure that they have enough preparation time so they really understand the test, but if their language level is low, that they spend more time learning English before they start doing test preparation.
Brilliant points, brilliant points. David, do you want to briefly, is there anything additional you want to add there? We've already had quite a lot. But.
Louise makes a really great point, because people have to be prepared to take the test before they take the test. You can't just say, look, I need a result. What can you give me? Not a lot at this stage. So we say 1 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 to 6 weeks, meaning you need to set goals and you need to develop study habits and you need to be studying regularly in order to consolidate your knowledge in preparation for the test. So I think, and it depends where the student's starting and where the student wants to end up as to how long it's going to take them. So they have to be realistic about that as well. You can't just turn up and take the test. The other interesting thing about that is you can be a native English speaker and take the test and not do as well as you thought you could do.
Absolutely.
Because the question types require a form of response in a limited amount of time. Native English speakers have to learn that. Students from South Africa find this as well. Their language levels are highly competent, but their ability to pass the test successfully isn't. Students living in England, English-speaking students living in England, taking the test for migration purposes to get to Australia, have to learn how to take the test, given that their level of language skills is very high, but their ability to deal with a test situation isn't. And it does, somebody wrote about a dyslexic student as well. There are dyslexic English first language speakers who are taking a test who have to learn what it is they need to do to pass the test. So mistakes that students make, I agree with Louise, allow enough time.
Yeah.
And remember that we're preparing for a test in this case as well. So it's not just your language skills, it's your ability to deal with the task in a limited amount of time that you need to get up to speed at, and to do that.
Absolutely.
Advance. Yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. I think that everything you've put out there is absolutely key, and I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to speak quite widely about it. This one might seem slightly controversial, but I do think it's worth asking, because it can be difficult to answer, and I know as teachers we do face it quite a lot. So within your role as a teacher or even a teacher trainer, whatever it may be, if you're always going to be asked the question at some point from a learner, which test do you think I should take? They want your advice. They know that you've been working in this area for a long time, you've got loads of experience, and not always, but I think it's fair to say sometimes the case will be from a teacher's perspective. You'll probably recommend the test that you teach, that you're familiar with, because you can speak with some level of familiarity. That said, because we always get asked this question, and we'll probably get asked it on the chat if we don't deal with it now, how do you navigate that situation? Will you be quite objective, you know, or you know, is this personal? Because this is a very open question here. Maybe you do prefer one test over another for your own reasons. It doesn't mean everyone has to share it. So I would like a sort of honest response with what you guys say in this situation, or what you would say if you were asked.
Well, I always try to expose to the students the characteristics of each test that I'm an expert on. So for example, IELTS, TOEFL, and PTE. And firstly, I ask the student which tests are accepted for his purpose, and then expose what each test will demand from him. If it's a student that I have already been teaching for a while, I can say that from what I know from your, let's suppose, computer literacy or your writing skills, I would recommend this one. I will do that, but within the tests that I'm, you know, an expert on, as TOEFL, IELTS, and PT nowadays. But definitely, I would expose to the student what each test demand, and also the benefits of taking each one, because there are benefits.
Yeah, where can it take you as well? Yeah,
exactly. So for example, I love in PT the read aloud that they have to practice. This is a preparation, a life skill preparation for presentations, for interviews, you know. So once you look at it, not superficially, once you look into each section and each task carefully, you're able to suggest the best one for your student. And I think this is very helpful for the student. It's our role as a teacher is to provide this information for students. We have to be prepared for this. We can't be shy.
Such a good point. I mean, you made brilliant points there. Louise, you were nodding the whole time as well. I don't know.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Anna. Yes, you know, I have the same opinion completely. But the other thing that I think is very useful to some students is the fast turnaround for getting your results with PTE Academic. Some students need their results fast. They're trying to get into university. They've applied to a lot of universities, and you know, time is of the essence. And sometimes, you know, that can save them. But you know,
and students can even get their result. Sorry, I was just going to say that students can even get their result within the same day now in some cases, which is incredible. But sorry, Louise, continue.
And I think unrivaled. I think it's the only test where this can happen. But otherwise, I completely agree with Anna. I think you need to know your students. And if you know your students and you know the tests, then you can match your students with the test and, you know, which one you think is going to be best. You know, as we said before, it's with their computer literacy as well. And, you know, and also that their facility with computers and the, you know, how at home they feel with speaking to a device.
Right. No, David, would you give similar advice? Is there anything unique that you would say that perhaps hasn't been touched on yet?
We give the simplest answer is, it's not a simple answer, but it appears to be a simple answer. Is if you're people take the IELTS test, they fail the writing. PTE writing is more straightforward. It's more straightforward to teach, and it's more straightforward to do in the amount of time that you've got. However, the speaking tends to be marked in a way that is more challenging for the students than the speaker. But I think Louise's point is exactly right. So the simple thing, without actually solving the students' problems, is to say, well, I can see from your writing you haven't done, you failed. You can give PTE a try, because I know that I can teach you how to write a PTE essay that you'll score well in, because it's more straightforward to teach and it's more straightforward to do. But it doesn't actually address what Louise, the real answer is, know your students, know your student. So find out about the student to give them advice and work out, well, you actually need help in this, this, and this. Your strengths are this, this, and this. And then we'll start from there. So, and then consider. So that's a good idea to have. Just like the other question, know both tests, because then you can say, well, you've got every good chance of doing this. And the result of an IELTS test will give you that. The result of a PTE test will give you this opportunity. Let's sit down and discuss and feel make a decision with them in mind. Yeah.
Brilliant. I thought all of you gave such brilliant points there. I'm so glad that I asked that question. The last question I'm going to put you in, and maybe let's finish off with some questions that have come in. I want you to consider, and again, this is it will be a personal response for you all. But for you that have had experience with teaching PTE or training teachers or on teaching PTE, what are the benefits of becoming a PTE academic prep teacher for you guys personally? And you may well have all quite different perspectives on this, but I think it would be really nice again for our audience to hear some of your experiences. So some benefits for you of being involved in PTE academic prep. Anyone want to go first?
Well, one of the great benefits is that you offer options to your student, first of all. Secondly, I really feel all test preps are important for students, but with the PTE, with the 20 sections, we prepare our students, all students who are taking a high-stake proficiency test, they are going to study or live in an English-speaking country. Language is communication. The better they communicate, the more successful they will be professionally, personally, and academically. And I feel that the PTE does offer this to the student. You work all skills. Like I said, the read aloud part, I find that fantastic because you really prepare the student to expose himself more, and he learns to hear himself in English. And I find that fantastic. So
brilliant.
Yeah, I feel that it's an option for the student, but also you offer to the student as a teacher. You can diagnose, like I said, there's a score report. So you diagnose where the student needs, support more, where he needs to reinforce. So there are so many benefits, to teaching PTE, and the results that they get, as Louise said, the turnaround. I think that's fantastic as well. So there are
absolutely, yeah, brilliant. So quite varied points you had there. I don't know, is there another final point either Louise or David wanted to give before we go to questions? Louise, you looked like you're about to speak there. Anything that's positive for you around being involved with you in any way around being involved with test prep and PTE?
Well, I've been involved in high stakes tests since the 90s. I mean, a very long time, and writing test items and analyzing tests, etc. And when I first met the PTE academic, I just thought, wow, this is a whole different way of looking at testing language. And for me personally and professionally, I think it's been, it's kind of extended my repertoire of testing. And, I mean, today I'm editing tests for my organization, and we've just changed with our move to online teaching. We've actually moved to testing reading and listening in a very similar way to PTE academic. Short texts, 1 or 2 questions per text, multiple texts. And I think it's a much better way of going. But I've really enjoyed it. I'm a bit of a testing person. I love it. And I think it's a great test.
Brilliant. David, anything else?
Well, I agree, of course, with everything, because I think from an academic, you were teaching students at PTE academic, so it's not PTE semi-formal, so it's a PTE academic. So we're teaching skills, 20 different skill types that are used in a university context. So if you get good at describing image, you can continually describe image. If you get good at note taking and then summarizing a spoken or a written text, you can do that in your university context. Now you need to have the language skills to be able to do it well, but the skill type itself is specific to learning in a higher education environment, and that's why I 100% agree with Louise, and Anna. That's why it's a good test to teach, because these are skills that are useful, as well as being able to test your language skills.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that I think the note taking is really interesting with this test, because they don't actually test note taking. That's not tested. But you can't score well if you can't take notes. So we have to teach note taking because it's an underlying skill to be successful in the test. But it's not tested in the test.
That's right. And the same the same covertly, the same applies for comprehension skills in reading as well. We have to teach reading comprehension, ways of comprehending a text, particularly in a short space of time, which does actually speed up the process well, in order to be able to pass multiple choice single answer or multiple choice multiple answer as well. So in the same way that we learn note-taking skills, we have to teach students how to read, how to comprehend quickly. And listening comprehension is the same thing, how to listen for meaning and take notes and then write a response as well. So even the process of listening has to be taught, because listening is a skill we take for granted, but you can't. You actually have to technically learn how to listen, particularly for meaningful information, create meaning from a spoken text and meaning from a written text. And so comprehending those levels of comprehension need to be taught and practiced. And most people aren't conscious of that until we're taught it. And as teachers, we see it because we know the need to teach it. The same for note-taking skills as well. So students fail because they don't fail, but they don't know, how do I take notes? Great, I'm glad you asked that question. Here we go. And so we structure a lesson on how to take notes. Yeah.
And again, it's those skills that out with preparation for the test, they're going to continue to use way off into their working lives, studying lives, whatever it is they go to do to the future, go on to do in the future, which is why developing these skills in your learners is so important and so useful. I can see quite a lot of the questions actually that got answered really early on in the session we have covered already. But one in particular I wanted to get to right now because we were asked it a lot, and particularly because we have quite a lot of people that aren't too familiar with PTE Academic. Because it's marked by AI, it's not, the test is not marked by a human. Someone is asking, it's a really good question, how do we manage, or how does the marking systems manage different accents? Now, Louise, I might ask you, because I know that you've answered this a few times in previous sessions, so you'll have quite a brief, concise answer, but something simple. Obviously, learners from lots of different countries are taking this test. They're going to have different accents.
Yep.
How is that dealt with?
That's dealt with by the system before it actually gets to us. The training, the scoring engines are trained on a very wide range of accents, both English native speaker accents and non-native speaker accents from all over the world. And there's over 200 accents have been used to train these scoring engines. And so the scoring engine recognizes all the different accents. Now, if the scoring engine doesn't recognize an accent, it's been trained to not to score that test, but to give that test out, and it goes to a human scorer. And then the human scorer's scores gets put back into the scoring engine. And so the engine learns from that, that experience of not being able to score correctly on an accent.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that's definitely as much detail as we would need to go into to cover that one. So thank you for that, Louise. There was something else that came up here that I wanted to ask, address this to all of you. So when learners are taking this test, what would happen if they simply cannot answer the question and someone's asked here, would I still get points if I answer, I don't understand this question? That's because you haven't understand how it's been put across, you haven't heard it right. What's going to happen in that situation? Quick answer for that?
If they can't answer the question, they can't get the points.
Okay, so I think that one's...
So one of the other questions that follows on from that, because once you deal with thousands of people, they ask for the same question, is part of the exam worth more than another part of the exam? And I think the answer to that in the end is possibly, but don't worry about it, because you actually need to be good at every section of the exam. So don't concentrate on not doing well in one section, because your psychology is not quite in line with success. So you need to be good at all of it. So don't worry if one part is worth more, and learn how to do each part well.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a really, really good piece of advice. I notice here we've got various sort of more straightforward questions around how do candidate with certain physical disabilities apply? Yes, on our website, pearsonpte.com, they can go through a special arrangement section to apply. Yes, so we have those provisions in place. The guarantee period for PTE is 2 years, still accepted 2 years from when they have taken the test as well. I'm just trying to see if there's any others that we haven't got to. Someone's asking here as well around, are these points sort of consolidated for learners? We've said so much interesting stuff here, both for teachers and for learners. Ultimately, on our website, pearsonpte.com, there's a huge test taker area. We have handbooks, PDF files, online free training that students can take to understand everything they need to know before the test, before they even start the journey with a teacher, a lesson, if that's the case. And of course, as well, for teachers, we have free teacher training. I don't know if Amy's able to put the link to it in the chat. If not, we will put it in the follow-up email to you. I'm seeing that nearly everything else we have answered across the course of this session, but I just want to put it to you, Louise, David, Anna, you've been absolutely superb panelists. Do you have a closing remark? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but any closing final remarks that you want to leave our teachers with that have joined our session today? Maybe they're already involved in PTE, maybe they're considering it, or they want to be involved in test prep. I'd love for you to your final take on this before we close off.
Well, I believe that before starting teaching, and even if you're a teacher, taking the test, sitting through the test, I think it's a fabulous experience. When I sat PT for the first time, I was amazed. I loved it right away because it was challenging. Of course, I had a teacher perspective and I was seeing it as a teacher, as the student may see it with a different, analysis. But before teaching, definitely sit through the test. There are many chances on the Pearson website. You can, get that package, and it's really, really helpful. And you have a lot of insights on how to prepare your students. It's definitely a must.
Yes, take the test, put yourself in the driving seat. Brilliant, Anna. Louise, David, we've got 2 minutes. You've got a minute each.
Look, I think we've all pivoted. Sorry?
Louise, go for it.
Okay, we've all pivoted in the last 16 months. For a lot of us anyway, our working lives have completely changed. So moving from one test, teaching one test to another, I think is nothing in comparison to what we've done in the last 16 months. So I think, if you haven't done it, if you don't know much about the test, just do it. Yeah, it's not difficult. It takes a bit of time, but look where we've come in the last 16 months in our teaching practice.
Very inspiring, Louise. Thank you. David, you've got the final remark.
Oh, good. I get it. Yes, because I can tell you that all of us taught ourselves how to teach PTE. Now so we brought our language skills to PTE, taught ourselves, and ended up with many, many PTE students. So that's the way we learned it. And the resources, Pearson provide very good resources, a perfect book to learn from, out of which you can write your own resources, out of which you can understand how resources are written and what needs to have happen. Take the test yourself as well, if you can. I've done it several times. Anna's probably done it as well. And Louise may have done it, but it's a joy to take it, because you put yourself in the position of the student and work out what it is that they need to do in order to be successful in the test. So make it a personal experience and do it, and then bring your skills to teaching the students who really do want to learn.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And we'll make sure in our follow-up email that we do give you our sort of compiled list of resources, free resources and training that you can access right away if you're interested or you want to get started. So it's the top of the hour. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much to our panelists. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.